The dust beneath Amelia Bradford's bleeding feet burned like hot coals as the banker's wife shoved her forward down Main Street, and every step sent sharp stones biting into her tender soles, while the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Dalhart, Texas, in the sweltering summer of 1884. She had worked as a seamstress in Mrs. Thornton's dress shop for 3 years, saving every penny, dreaming of opening her own business someday. But all of that shattered when the banker's wife accused her of stealing a pearl necklace that Amelia had never even touched. The sheriff had been away dealing with cattle rustlers near the Oklahoma border, and Mrs. Thornton, drunk on her own self-righteous fury and the power her husband's money afforded her, decided to take justice into her own hands. "Let everyone see what happens to thieves in this town, Mrs. Thornton shrieked, her face red and twisted with rage as she gripped Amelia's arm hard enough to bruise. The older woman had ripped the shoes from Amelia's feet herself, tossing them into the street where a wagon had immediately crushed them beneath heavy wheels. "You thought you could steal from me." "From me?" Amelia's throat felt raw from trying to explain, from pleading her innocence, but Mrs. Thornton had already made up her mind. The 22-year-old woman stumbled forward, her simple calico dress dusty and torn at the hem, her dark blonde hair falling loose from its pins. Tears streaked down her freckled cheeks as townspeople emerged from shops and homes to watch the spectacle. Some looked away in shame, others whispered among themselves, but no one stepped forward to help. Mrs. Thornton's husband owned the bank that held mortgages on half the properties in town, and crossing his wife meant financial ruin. The street seemed endless as Amelia was forced forward, each step agony on the sun-scorched dirt mixed with sharp pebbles and broken glass. Her feet left small spots of blood in her wake. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, could hear the murmurs and gasps, could sense the pity mixed with fear. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, and humiliation burned through her even hotter than the pain. Vaughn had just finished loading supplies onto his horse outside the general store when he heard the commotion. The 25-year-old cowboy turned, his hand instinctively moving toward the Colt revolver at his hip before he registered what he was seeing. A young woman, clearly in distress, was being paraded down the street by Cordelia Thornton, the banker's notoriously cruel wife. What caught his attention immediately was the blood, the way the girl's feet left crimson marks with every forced step. Something fierce and protective surged through Isaac's chest as he watched. He had only arrived in Dalhart 3 days ago, hired by a local rancher named Samuel Morgan to help manage a herd of longhorns being driven up from South Texas. He did not know the politics of this town, did not know who held what power, and frankly, he did not care. What he saw was wrong, plain and simple, and Vaughn had never been one to stand by when someone needed help. His long legs carried him into the street before he had fully formed a plan. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with broad shoulders built from years of ranch work, sun-bronzed skin, and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his worn chambray shirt. His jaw was strong and often shadowed with stubble, and his eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue that seemed to see right through pretense and lies. "That is enough," Isaac said, his deep voice carrying the kind of authority that made people stop and listen. He stepped directly into Mrs. Thornton's path, forcing her to halt or collide with him. Mrs. Thornton's eyes widened with indignation. "How dare you interfere? This girl is a thief, and she is receiving exactly what she deserves. Move aside, cowboy, or I will have my husband ensure you never work in this county again." Isaac's expression did not change. He had heard threats like that before, from men far more dangerous than a banker's wife. I do not know what happened between you two, madam, but this, he gestured to Amelia's bleeding feet, this is not justice. This is cruelty. Amelia looked up at the stranger through her tears, hardly daring to believe someone was actually standing up for her. She could see the determination in his face, the set of his jaw, the way he held himself like a man who had faced down worse than an angry woman on a dusty street. Hope flickered in her chest, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. She stole my grandmother's pearl necklace, Mrs. Thornton insisted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. I left it at the dress shop for her to repair the clasp, and when I returned it was gone. She is the only one who could have taken it. Did anyone see her take it? Isaac asked calmly. Well, no, but did you search her belongings, find the necklace in her possession? Mrs. Thornton's face turned an even deeper shade of red. She has obviously hidden it somewhere, or sold it already. Everyone knows these working girls cannot be trusted. Isaac felt his temper flare at the contempt in the woman's voice, but he kept his tone measured. So you are punishing her based on an assumption. Where I come from, that is called persecution, not justice. He looked down at Amelia, really looked at her, and saw past the tears and dirt to the honest face beneath. Her green eyes met his, and something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended words. Without another word to Mrs. Thornton, Isaac sat down right there in the middle of the street. Amelia watched in confusion as he pulled off his worn leather boots, first the right and then the left. They were good boots, well-made and clearly expensive, the kind a working cowboy saved up for because they had to last through years of hard use. Here, he said, looking up at Amelia with an expression so gentle it made her heart ache. Put these on. I cannot, Amelia whispered, her voice hoarse. I cannot take your boots. You can and you will, Isaac said firmly but kindly. Your feet are torn up and I have rode horses my whole life. My feet are tough as leather. These will not fit you perfect, but they will be better than walking barefoot. Mrs. Thornton sputtered in outrage. This is absolutely absurd. I forbid it. I will have you arrested for interfering with what? Isaac interrupted, finally letting some of his anger show. With your need to humiliate someone weaker than you. With your decision to play judge and jury without a shred of evidence. He stood up, and even in his sock feet, he was imposing enough that Mrs. Thornton took an involuntary step backward. I suggest you let this young lady go and take your complaints to the sheriff when he returns. If she truly stole from you, let the law handle it proper. A small crowd had gathered now, and Isaac could see several people nodding in agreement with his words. Mrs. Thornton might have power through her husband's money, but she did not have the town's love or respect. She looked around, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, and her expression turned calculating. Fine, she spat, but this is not over. When Sheriff Morrison returns, I will see that justice is served. She released Amelia's arm with a rough shove that nearly sent the injured girl sprawling, then turned on her heel and stormed away, her expensive skirts swishing angrily. Amelia swayed on her feet, the adrenaline that had been keeping her upright suddenly draining away. Isaac moved quickly, catching her before she could fall. Easy there, he murmured. I have got you. She looked down at the boots he had set at her feet. They were far too large for her, but he was right that they would be better than nothing. With shaking hands, she tried to slip her damaged feet into them, but even the gentle pressure of the leather against her cuts made her gasp in pain. Isaac saw her struggle and made a decision. Those are not going to work right now, he said. Your feet need tending first. Before Amelia could protest, he bent down and scooped her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Amelia let out a small sound of surprise, her arms automatically going around his neck for balance. "What are you doing?" "Carrying you somewhere you can get those feet cleaned and bandaged," Isaac said matter-of-factly, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Where do you live?" "The boarding house on 3rd Street," Amelia managed, acutely aware of how close she was to this stranger, how strong his arms felt around her, how his shirt smelled of leather and soap and something distinctly masculine. "Mrs. Paulson's place." "But I can walk, truly. I do not want to trouble you further." "Your feet are leaving blood on my shirt sleeve," Isaac pointed out gently. "I think we are past worrying about trouble." He started walking, his sock feet padding softly on the dirt street, completely unbothered by the stares and whispers that followed them. Amelia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but there was also something else, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. She had been alone since her parents died of fever 5 years ago, making her own way in a world that was often harsh to young women without family or fortune. The kindness of this stranger, the certainty with which he had defended her, the sacrifice of his own boots, it all felt almost too much to process. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching. "You did not have to do that, Mrs. Thornton is a powerful woman in this town, and you have likely made an enemy today." Isaac glanced down at her, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a slight smile. "I have made enemies before. I am not much concerned with what Mrs. Thornton thinks of me." His expression grew more serious. "Did you take her necklace?" Amelia stiffened in his arms. "No, I would never. I have worked hard for everything I have, and I would not throw it all away for a piece of jewelry, no matter how valuable. Someone else must have taken it, or perhaps she simply misplaced it and was too proud to admit it." Isaac nodded, something in her voice convincing him completely. He had always been a good judge of character, and everything about this young woman spoke of honesty and integrity. "I believe you," he said simply. Those 3 words, spoken with such conviction, broke something open inside Amelia. She buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. All the fear and pain and humiliation of the past hours came pouring out, and Isaac just held her tighter, murmuring soothing words as he continued walking. Mrs. Paulson's boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide front porch and faded yellow paint. The elderly landlady was sweeping the steps when she saw Isaac approaching with Amelia in his arms, and her weathered face immediately creased with concern. "Lord have mercy, what happened?" she exclaimed, dropping her broom and hurrying forward. "Mrs. Thornton accused her of theft," Isaac explained. "Made her walk barefoot through town. Her feet are torn up pretty bad." Mrs. Paulson's expression darkened with anger. "That hateful woman. I have half a mind to march down to that bank and give her a piece of my mind." She held open the door. "Bring her inside, young man. We will get her fixed up. Amelia, dear, you poor thing." Isaac carried Amelia through the modest parlor and up the narrow staircase, following Mrs. Paulson's directions to a small room at the end of the hall. It was a simple space, neat and clean, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a trunk that likely held all of Amelia's worldly possessions. A small window looked out over the dusty street, and a few wildflowers in a chipped vase on the windowsill added a touch of color. He set Amelia down gently on the bed, and she immediately tried to compose herself, wiping at her tear-stained face with the back of her hand. "I am sorry," she said, her voice still thick with emotion. "I do not usually fall apart like that." "You have nothing to apologize for," Isaac assured her. "What you went through today would have broken most people." Mrs. Paulson bustled in with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to hurt, dear," she warned Amelia, "but we need to clean those cuts good or they will fester." Isaac moved to leave to give Amelia privacy, but Mrs. Paulson stopped him. "You might as well stay, young man. I will need someone strong to hold her still if the pain gets too bad. Besides, you look like you could use some water and a place to sit yourself. Walking through town in your socks must have been something." Isaac glanced down at his feet, which were indeed dusty but otherwise fine. "I've gone barefoot plenty of times," he said with a shrug. "It is no hardship." Over the next hour, Isaac watched as Mrs. Paulson carefully cleaned Amelia's feet, removing bits of gravel and glass, applying whiskey that made Amelia bite down on a strip of leather to keep from crying out. He found himself wincing in sympathy, wishing he could take her pain away. When Mrs. Paulson finally wrapped both feet in clean bandages, he felt almost as relieved as Amelia looked. "There now," Mrs. Paulson said, patting Amelia's knee. "You stay off those feet for at least a few days. I will bring your meals up and tell Mrs. Thornton she can go hang if she comes looking for you." Despite everything, Amelia managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Paulson," the landlady turned to Isaac. "And thank you, young man, it is good to know there are still decent folks in this world." She studied him with shrewd eyes. "You are new in town, are you not?" "Yes, madam. Isaac Vaughn. I am working for Samuel Morgan, helping with his cattle operation." "Morgan is a good man," Mrs. Paulson said approvingly. "You are welcome here any time, Mr. Vaughn. Now, I will leave you two to talk for a bit, but keep this door open, you hear. I run a respectable establishment." After she left, an awkward silence fell. Isaac stood near the window, suddenly very aware that he was alone with a young woman in her bedroom, even if the door was open and the situation was entirely innocent. Amelia sat on the bed, her bandaged feet propped on a pillow, looking small and vulnerable but also stronger than he expected, given what she had endured. "I do not even know how to thank you properly," Amelia said finally. "What you did today, standing up to Mrs. Thornton, giving me your boots, carrying me here, it was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Isaac turned to face her, his expression serious. "You do not need to thank me for doing what was right." He hesitated, then added, "What will you do now? Will Mrs. Thornton let you keep your job?" Amelia's face fell. "I doubt it. She owns the dress shop. Even if she did not, I cannot imagine she would want me working there after this. I suppose I will have to find other work, if anyone in town will hire me after being accused of theft." The unfairness of it all made Isaac's jaw clench. There has got to be someone who can stand up to her, someone who can make her see reason. "Her husband controls most of the money and credit in this town," Amelia said quietly. "People are afraid to cross them. I do not blame them. Most folks have families to feed, businesses to protect." She looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "I will be all right. I always have been before. I can take in sewing from home, perhaps, or find work as a cook or a housekeeper." Isaac found himself reluctant to leave, even though he knew he should. There was something about this young woman that drew him, something beyond her obvious beauty or her current vulnerability. It was the strength he saw in her eyes, the determination not to be defeated by circumstances. It reminded him of his own mother, who had raised him alone after his father died in a mining accident when Isaac was just a boy. "I should let you rest," he said finally, moving toward the door. "But I will come back tomorrow, if that is all right with you, to check on you." Amelia's face lit up with a smile that transformed her features from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "I would like that very much, Mr. Vaughn." "Isaac," he corrected. "Just Isaac. Then you must call me Amelia." He nodded, committing the name to memory, savoring the way it felt in his mind. Amelia. It suited her somehow, gentle but with strength underneath. "Rest well, Amelia. I will see you tomorrow." As Isaac walked back through town toward the Morgan ranch, his boots now back on his feet after Mrs. Paulson had insisted he take them, he found his thoughts consumed by green eyes and a smile that had made something in his chest feel warm. He had drifted from town to town for years now, working cattle drives and ranch jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. It was the life he had chosen after his mother passed, a life of freedom and movement that had seemed appealing when he was 20 and restless. But lately, if he was honest with himself, the constant moving had begun to feel less like freedom and more like running from something he could not quite name. Maybe it was the need for connection, for purpose beyond the next job. Maybe it was the loneliness that crept in during long nights under the stars, when the cattle were quiet and there was nothing to do but think. Samuel Morgan was waiting on the porch of the ranch house when Isaac rode up on his bay gelding. The rancher was in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades spent working under the Texas sun. He was a fair man, known for treating his workers well and paying honest wages. "Heard you had quite an afternoon in town," Morgan said as Isaac dismounted and began unsaddling his horse. Word traveled fast in small communities, Isaac reflected. "Yes, sir. Ran into a situation that needed addressing." Morgan nodded thoughtfully. "Cordelia Thornton came by about an hour ago, madder than a wet hen. Tried to tell me I should fire you for interfering in her business. I told her what I did with my men was my business, not hers." Isaac paused in brushing down his horse. "I apologize if I caused you trouble, Mr. Morgan. That was not my intention." "No apology needed," Morgan said firmly. "I have known Cordelia Thornton for 20 years, and she has always been a bully and a snob. Her husband is not much better, truth be told. You did the right thing standing up for that girl. Amelia Bradford is a good person, works hard, keeps to herself. If Cordelia says she stole from her, I would bet money that Cordelia is either mistaken or lying outright." Relief washed through Isaac. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "That said," Morgan continued, "you have made yourself an enemy today. The Thorntons have long memories and short tempers. You watch yourself around them." "I will," Isaac promised, though privately he thought the Thorntons were the least of his concerns. He had dealt with rustlers and claim jumpers and all manner of dangerous men over the years. A banker and his wife did not particularly frighten him. That night, lying in his bunk in the ranch hand's quarters, Isaac found it hard to sleep. His mind kept returning to the feel of Amelia in his arms, the way she had looked up at him with such trust and gratitude, the sound of her voice when she said his name. He barely knew her, he reminded himself. One afternoon did not constitute a relationship, no matter how intense the circumstances had been. But something told him that Amelia Bradford was going to become very important to him, whether he planned for it or not. Meanwhile, across town in her small room at the boarding house, Amelia was having similar thoughts. She lay in bed, her feet throbbing despite the laudanum Mrs. Paulson had given her for the pain, and replayed the day's events in her mind. The humiliation of being dragged through the street, the agony of her torn feet, all of it faded into insignificance compared to the moment Isaac Vaughn had stepped into her path and said, "That is enough," with such absolute conviction. She had seen him around town a few times over the past days, had noticed him the way any woman would notice a handsome man, but she had never imagined she would meet him like this. Had never imagined he would be the one to rescue her from her worst moment. Amelia thought about the feel of his arms around her, so strong and steady, the gentleness with which he had carried her despite his obvious strength. She thought about his eyes, that striking gray blue that seemed to see right into her soul, and the way his voice had gentled when he spoke to her. She thought about the fact that he had given her his boots without a second thought, had walked through town in his socks to help her, a perfect stranger. Who was Isaac Vaughn? Where had he come from? What had brought him to Dalhart? And most importantly, would she ever see him again? Or had his promise to visit tomorrow just been politeness? These questions swirled through her mind as she finally drifted off to sleep. Her dreams filled with gray-blue eyes and a voice that made her feel safe. The next day arrived hot and bright, the Texas sun beating down on Dalhart with relentless intensity. Isaac finished his morning chores at the Morgan Ranch as quickly as possible, mucking out stalls and checking water troughs and repairing a section of fence that had come loose. His mind was elsewhere the whole time, and more than once, Sam Morgan's foreman, a grizzled man named Pete Harrison, had to call his name twice to get his attention. "You all right there, Vaughn?" Pete asked around the wad of tobacco in his cheek. "You seem mighty distracted today." "Just thinking," Isaac replied, hammering in another fence post with perhaps more force than strictly necessary. Pete grinned, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Thinking about a certain young lady, I would wager. Word around town is you swept her off her feet. Literally." Isaac felt his ears grow hot. "I was just helping someone in need." "Uh-huh," Pete said, clearly not believing a word of it. "Well, you better get on into town then, before you bust that fence post clear through to China. We can manage without you for a few hours." Isaac did not need to be told twice. He cleaned up as best he could, changing into a fresh shirt and combing his hair, feeling foolish for caring so much about his appearance but unable to stop himself. He saddled his horse and rode into town, his heart beating faster the closer he got to the boarding house. Mrs. Paulson answered his knock with a knowing smile. "She has been watching out that window for the past hour," the landlady said quietly. "Go on up, but remember, door stays open." "Yes, madam," Isaac agreed, climbing the stairs two at a time. Amelia was sitting in a chair by the window, her bandaged feet propped on a small stool, wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the green in her eyes. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and her face, while still showing signs of yesterday's ordeal, was cleaned and composed. She looked up when he entered, and the smile that spread across her face made Isaac's breath catch. "You came," she said, and there was such genuine happiness in her voice that Isaac felt something shift in his chest. "I said I would," he replied, taking off his hat and holding it awkwardly in his hands. "How are your feet today?" "Painful," Amelia admitted, "but Mrs. Paulson says they are healing well. No sign of infection, thank goodness. I should be able to walk again in a few days, though it will be tender for a while." Isaac pulled up another chair and sat down across from her, close enough to talk comfortably but far enough to be proper. "I am glad to hear it. Have you had any more trouble from Mrs. Thornton?" Amelia's expression darkened slightly. "She sent a note this morning, informing me that my employment at the dress shop is terminated immediately and that I am not to come around asking for references or back wages. She also said that if her necklace is not returned within the week, she will press charges with the sheriff." Anger flared hot in Isaac's chest. "That is not right. You earned those wages." "I know," Amelia said quietly, "but there is nothing I can do about it. She has all the power in this situation." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Then Isaac leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression determined. "What if we could find the real thief, or prove that the necklace was never stolen at all?" Amelia looked at him in surprise. "How would we do that?" "I do not know yet," Isaac admitted. "But there has to be a way. Someone must have seen something or knows something. Maybe if we ask around, talk to people who were at the dress shop that day." Hope flickered in Amelia's eyes, but she tried to tamp it down. "Why would you do this? You barely know me, Isaac. You have already done so much, and I have nothing to offer you in return. Isaac met her gaze steadily. Maybe I want to know you better, he said, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. Maybe I think you got a raw deal and deserve someone in your corner. Maybe I just do not like seeing bullies win. He paused, then added more softly, or maybe all of those things. Amelia felt her cheeks flush, but she could not look away from his eyes. There was something there, something warm and genuine that made her heart race. I would like to know you better too, she admitted quietly. A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, transforming his usually serious expression into something that made Amelia's breath catch. Well then, he said, I guess we should start by figuring out what really happened to that necklace. Over the next few days, Isaac became a regular visitor at the boarding house. He would come each afternoon after finishing his work at the Morgan Ranch, and he and Amelia would sit together in her room, talking for hours while Mrs. Paulson kept a watchful but approving eye on them. They discussed the mystery of the missing necklace, yes, but they also talked about everything else under the sun. Isaac told her about his childhood in Colorado, about his father's death in the silver mines, and how his mother had worked herself nearly to death to keep food on the table. He told her about learning to ride and rope from an old cowboy named Dutch who had taken pity on a scrawny 10-year-old boy. He told her about his years drifting from ranch to ranch, always moving, never quite finding a place that felt like home. Amelia shared her own story, about growing up as the only child of a schoolteacher and a shopkeeper in a small town outside of Fort Worth. She told him about the fever that had swept through when she was 17, taking both her parents within days of each other. She told him about the relatives who had promised to care for her, but had instead stolen her inheritance and turned her out with nothing but the clothes on her back. She told him about making her way to Dalhart, about learning to sew and building a life from scratch through sheer determination. With each conversation, they grew closer. Isaac found himself fascinated by Amelia's quiet strength, by the way she could find hope even in the darkest situations. Amelia found herself drawn to Isaac's steady presence, his unwavering sense of right and wrong, the way he listened to her as if her words truly mattered. By the fourth day, Amelia was able to walk again, though her feet were still tender and she had to move slowly. Isaac insisted on being the one to help her down the stairs for her first real walk outside, his arm steady around her waist, his patience infinite as she took careful steps. They walked together down the quieter side streets of Dalhart, avoiding Main Street where Mrs. Thornton might see them. The evening air was cooler than the day had been, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of dust and prairie grass. They talked about ordinary things, about the town and its people, about Isaac's work at the ranch and Amelia's plans for finding new employment. Mrs. Henderson at the hotel mentioned she might need help with laundry, Amelia said as they paused near a small park where a few children were playing. It is not sewing, but it is honest work, and she does not seem afraid of Mrs. Thornton. That is good, Isaac said, but there was something in his tone that made Amelia look up at him questioningly. What is it? Isaac was quiet for a moment, watching the children play, his expression thoughtful. I have been thinking, he said finally. About what you said, about how you wanted to open your own business someday, about your dreams. Those dreams are gone now, Amelia said, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. I lost my savings when Mrs. Thornton fired me without my back wages. I will be starting over from nothing. What if you did not have to start from nothing? Isaac asked, turning to face her fully. What if someone wanted to help you? Amelia felt a flutter of unease. Isaac, I could not possibly accept money from you. You have already done too much. I am not talking about charity, Isaac said quickly. I am talking about partnership, investment. He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. Sam Morgan has been talking about needing someone to make curtains and cushions and such for the ranch house. His wife passed a few years back, and the place has gotten worn and shabby. He would pay good money for quality work, and I know several other ranchers in the area who would probably want the same. Amelia stared at him. You would help me start a business. I would help you rebuild what was taken from you, Isaac corrected. You have the skill and the drive. You just need the opportunity. And maybe if you were willing, I could be your first investor. When you start making profit, you can pay me back, if that is what you want. It was too much. Too generous. Too good to be true. Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes, and she turned away, not wanting Isaac to see how deeply his offer affected her. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Isaac gently took her shoulders and turned her back to face him. His hands were warm through the fabric of her dress, and his eyes were intense as they met hers. Because in the few days I have known you, Amelia Bradford, you have made me feel more at home, more connected to something real than I have felt in years of wandering. Because I admire your strength and your kindness and your determination. Because when I think about leaving Dalhart and moving on to the next job, the next town, the thought of not seeing you again makes my chest ache. Amelia's breath caught. Isaac. I know it is fast, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know we have only just met, but I have never been one to dance around the truth, and the truth is that I am falling for you, Amelia. Hard and fast and completely. If that scares you, if it is too much, tell me now and I will step back. But if there is even a chance that you might feel the same way, then I want to be part of your life. I want to help you chase your dreams. I want to be the one standing beside you when you achieve them. For a long moment, Amelia could not speak. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure Isaac must be able to hear it. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever looked at her the way Isaac was looking at her now, as if she was something precious and rare and worth fighting for. It does not scare me, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Or maybe it does, but in a good way. The way standing at the edge of something wonderful and terrifying feels, because I am falling for you too, Isaac. I have been since the moment you stepped in front of Mrs. Thornton and refused to let her hurt me anymore. Since you gave me your boots and carried me home like I was worth protecting. Since you kept coming back, day after day, just to sit with me and talk. I do not know how this happened so fast, but I do not want it to stop. The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Neither do I, he said, and then, very slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, just a soft press of lips under the darkening Texas sky. Amelia felt the world tilt and reshape itself around this moment, around the feel of Isaac's mouth on hers, the warmth of his hand still on her shoulders, the way her heart seemed to be beating in time with his. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you, he admitted. Amelia laughed softly. Even covered in dust and tears with bloody feet, especially then, Isaac said seriously. Because even at your worst moment, you were beautiful. Because even when the world was being cruel, you did not let it make you cruel. That takes a special kind of strength, Amelia. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms as the evening deepened into night around them, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. Finally, reluctantly, Isaac walked Amelia back to the boarding house, holding her hand the entire way. Mrs. Paulson was waiting on the porch, and if she noticed the way Amelia's cheeks were flushed, or how Isaac could not seem to stop smiling, she kept it to herself. She simply nodded approvingly and told Amelia to get some rest. The next week passed in a blur of happiness for both of them. Isaac continued working at the Morgan Ranch during the day, but he spent every free moment with Amelia. True to his word, he spoke to Sam Morgan about hiring Amelia to make new furnishings for the ranch house, and Morgan agreed readily, offering a generous sum for the work. With that commission secured, Amelia was able to purchase fabric and supplies. Mrs. Paulson, who had taken a motherly interest in the young woman, offered to let Amelia use the boarding house's large dining room as a temporary workshop. Soon, the room was filled with bolts of fabric and spools of thread, and Amelia's skilled fingers were creating beautiful curtains and cushions and table linens. Isaac would often sit and watch her work, fascinated by the precision and artistry she brought to every stitch. Sometimes they would talk, and sometimes they would simply enjoy the comfortable silence that had developed between them, the kind of silence that only exists between people who are truly comfortable with each other. But the shadow of Mrs. Thornton's accusation still hung over them. The banker's wife had not pressed charges yet, but she had made it clear throughout town that Amelia was a thief, and many people remained wary. It hurt Amelia to see former friends cross the street to avoid her, to hear the whispers that followed her when she went to the general store. Isaac hated seeing her hurt by the gossip, but he admired the way she held her head high and refused to let it break her spirit. Still, he knew that until they could clear her name completely, there would always be a question mark hanging over her reputation. The break they needed came from an unexpected source. One evening, as Isaac was leaving the Morgan Ranch to head into town, a young woman approached him near the stable. She was perhaps 19, with mousy brown hair and nervous eyes, wearing a maid's simple dress and apron. "Mr. Vaughn," she said hesitantly. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Isaac recognized her as one of the Thorntons' household staff, a girl named Ellen who he had seen around town. "Of course," he said, curious about what she might want. Ellen glanced around nervously, as if afraid of being overheard. "I heard about what you did for Miss Bradford," she said in a low voice. "How you stood up to Mrs. Thornton and helped her. That took courage. Miss Bradford did not deserve what happened to her," Isaac said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Ellen said, shaking her head. "Most people would not have. Most people are too afraid." She took a deep breath as if gathering her courage. "I know something about the necklace, about what really happened to it." Isaac's heart began to beat faster. "What do you know?" Ellen looked around again, then stepped closer. "Mrs. Thornton did not leave the necklace at the dress shop to be repaired. The clasp was not broken. She wore it to a party that evening, and she was quite drunk when she returned home. She has been drinking more and more lately, though Mr. Thornton tries to hide it. Anyway, that night, she came home and went straight to bed without removing her jewelry properly. The next morning, she could not remember where she had put the necklace, and she accused Miss Bradford rather than admit she had lost it herself. "Can you prove this?" Isaac asked urgently. "Would you be willing to testify to what you know?" Ellen paled. "If I speak up, Mrs. Thornton will dismiss me without a reference. I will never find work in this town again. My family depends on my wages, Mr. Vaughn. I cannot afford to lose my position." Isaac understood, but frustration burned through him nonetheless. So Amelia's reputation is ruined, her livelihood destroyed, all because Mrs. Thornton is too proud to admit she made a mistake. "There is more," Ellen said quietly. 2 days ago I was cleaning Mrs. Thornton's bedroom, and I found the necklace. It had fallen behind her dressing table and gotten wedged in a crack in the floorboards. I gave it to her, thinking she would be relieved and would apologize to Miss Bradford. But instead, she flew into a rage and told me if I ever mentioned finding the necklace to anyone, she would see me arrested as an accomplice to theft. That is outrageous, Isaac said, his hands clenching into fists. That woman has to be stopped. I agree, Ellen said, surprising him. That is why I am here. I cannot testify publicly, but if you can find a way to force Mrs. Thornton to admit the truth, I will corroborate your story to the sheriff privately. My word alone might not be enough, but combined with other evidence, it might make a difference. Isaac nodded slowly, his mind already working on a plan. Thank you, Ellen. I know this took courage. I promise you, I will do everything I can to keep your name out of it. Relief washed over Ellen's face. Miss Bradford is lucky to have you fighting for her, she said softly. I hope she knows that. As Ellen hurried away, disappearing into the gathering dusk, Isaac stood alone with his thoughts. He now knew the truth, but proving it would be difficult without Ellen's public testimony. He needed to find a way to get Mrs. Thornton to admit what really happened, and for that, he would need help. That night, Isaac met with Sam Morgan and explained everything Ellen had told him. The rancher listened carefully, his weathered face growing increasingly grim. Cordelia Thornton is a piece of work, Morgan said when Isaac finished. But accusing an innocent woman to cover up her own failings, that crosses a line. What do you need from me, son? Permission to take some time away from the ranch to handle this, Isaac said. And maybe your presence when I confront her. You are one of the few people in this town with enough standing to challenge the Thorntons directly. Morgan nodded decisively. You have got both. Let me talk to Sheriff Morrison, too. He got back from dealing with those rustlers yesterday, and he is not going to be happy to hear about this. He is a fair man, and he will not take kindly to someone using a false accusation to settle personal scores. The confrontation came 2 days later. Sheriff Morrison, a stern man in his 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, personally went to the Thornton residence and requested that both Mr. and Mrs. Thornton come to his office to discuss the matter of the stolen necklace. Sam Morgan, Isaac, and Amelia were already waiting there when the Thorntons arrived. Mrs. Thornton's face turned red with anger when she saw them. What is the meaning of this, Sheriff Morrison? Why are these people here? Because I have some questions about your theft accusation, Mrs. Thornton, the sheriff said calmly, and I thought it best if we all discussed it together. There is nothing to discuss, Mrs. Thornton snapped. That girl stole from me, and I demand you arrest her immediately. Then you will not mind showing me the necklace that was stolen, Sheriff Morrison said mildly. Mrs. Thornton blinked. What? The necklace? If it was stolen, presumably you do not have it anymore. But if you do have it, well, that raises some interesting questions about whether a theft actually occurred. Amelia watched as color drained from Mrs. Thornton's face, then came rushing back in an angry flush. I do not have to explain myself to you or anyone else. My husband is an important man in this town, and we will not be treated like common criminals. No one is treating you like a criminal, Cordelia, Sam Morgan said in his quiet, authoritative voice. We are simply trying to get to the truth. Now, I have it on good authority that your necklace was never actually taken to the dress shop. I have it on good authority that you were wearing it the night you claim it was stolen. And I have it on good authority that it was found in your bedroom, behind your dressing table, just 2 days ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Mrs. Thornton opened and closed her mouth several times, looking between her husband, the sheriff, and the others. Mr. Thornton, who had been quiet up until now, suddenly spoke up. Cordelia, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. Tell them the truth. I will not, she hissed. I will not be humiliated by these people. You have already humiliated yourself, her husband said wearily, and you have humiliated me and our family in the process. I have tried to overlook your drinking, your increasingly erratic behavior, but this has gone too far. You accused an innocent woman of a crime she did not commit. You paraded her through town like a criminal, and you did it all to cover up your own carelessness. Mrs. Thornton looked as if she had been slapped. How dare you? The necklace is in your jewelry box right now, is it not? Mr. Thornton interrupted. Ellen found it behind your dressing table. She told me what happened, and she told me about your threats to keep her quiet. I have been waiting to see if you would do the right thing and apologize to Miss Bradford, but you have not, and now you have forced my hand. Sheriff Morrison leaned forward. Mrs. Thornton, making a false accusation is a serious matter. However, if you are willing to publicly apologize to Miss Bradford and make restitution for the wages you owe her, I am willing to consider this matter closed. If you refuse, I will be forced to investigate further, and that could lead to charges against you. For a long moment, it seemed as if Mrs. Thornton would refuse out of sheer stubborn pride. But then she looked at her husband's face, saw the disappointment and anger there, and something in her seemed to crumble. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I apologize. The necklace was not stolen. I misplaced it and blamed Miss Bradford out of anger and confusion. I was wrong. It was not a gracious apology, but it was an admission of guilt, and that was all that mattered. Amelia felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. After weeks of living under the shadow of false accusation, she was finally free. I will expect a full, public apology to be posted at the general store and published in the newspaper, Sheriff Morrison said firmly. And you will pay Miss Bradford not only her back wages, but also compensation for the income she lost due to your false accusation. Shall we say 6 months' wages? 6 months, Mrs. Thornton sputtered. That seems more than fair, considering the damage to Miss Bradford's reputation, Sam Morgan said. Unless you would prefer the sheriff to proceed with an investigation into making false accusations. Mr. Thornton pulled out his checkbook without another word. I will handle this, he said to his wife coldly. You have done enough damage. He wrote out a check and handed it to Amelia. Please accept my deepest apologies, Miss Bradford. My wife's behavior has been inexcusable. Amelia took the check with shaking hands, hardly able to believe this was really happening. Isaac moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. As the Thorntons left, Mrs. Thornton walking as if every step pained her and her husband following at a distance, Sheriff Morrison turned to Amelia with a kind expression. I am sorry you had to go through all this, Miss Bradford, he said. Small towns can be hard places when injustice takes root. But you have good people in your corner. He nodded at Isaac and Sam Morgan. That counts for a lot. After they left the sheriff's office, Isaac pulled Amelia into his arms right there on the street, not caring who saw them. She clung to him, all the tension and fear of the past weeks finally releasing in great shuddering sobs. It is over, Isaac murmured against her hair. It is finally over. You are free, Amelia. Your name is clear. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her tears, she was smiling through them. I could not have done this without you, she said. You never stopped believing in me, you never stopped fighting for me, and I never will, Isaac promised. For as long as you will let me, I will be in your corner, Amelia. Always. That night, Mrs. Paulson insisted on hosting a small celebration dinner at the boarding house. Sam Morgan came, along with several other townspeople who had quietly supported Amelia throughout her ordeal. Ellen even made a brief, nervous appearance, and Amelia hugged her tightly and thanked her for her courage. As the evening wore on and the guests gradually departed, Isaac and Amelia found themselves alone on the boarding house porch, sitting side by side on the swing that hung there. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "What happens now?" Amelia asked softly. "You have a job with Mr. Morgan and I have my sewing commissions. We could go on as we have been, but, Isaac prompted, turning to look at her. "But I want more," Amelia admitted, her cheeks flushing even in the darkness. "I want more than just seeing you when your work is done. I want more than just sitting and talking, as wonderful as that is. I want—" She trailed off, suddenly shy. Isaac took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "What do you want, Amelia?" She met his eyes, gathering her courage. "I want a life with you. A real life. A home, a future, everything. Is that too much to ask? Is it too soon?" "No," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "It is not too soon and it is not too much. It is exactly what I want too." He slipped off the swing and, to Amelia's shock, dropped to one knee in front of her. "Isaac, what are you doing?" she whispered, her heart hammering. "Something I have wanted to do since about the third day I knew you," he said with a crooked smile. "Amelia Bradford, I know we have not known each other long by traditional standards. I know some people will say we are rushing, that we should wait and be practical and sensible. But I have spent too many years of my life just drifting, waiting for something I could not name. And then I found you. Or maybe you found me. Either way, I know with absolute certainty that you are what I have been looking for. You are my home, Amelia. You are where I want to plant roots and build a life. So I am asking you, right here and right now, will you marry me?" Amelia could not speak for a moment, too overwhelmed with emotion. Then she slid off the swing and dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she said fiercely. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Vaughn, today, tomorrow, whenever you want. Yes." He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise, and neither of them noticed Mrs. Paulson watching from the window with tears of happiness in her eyes. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church at the edge of town. Sam Morgan walked Amelia down the aisle, having offered to stand in for the father she had lost. Mrs. Paulson cried through the entire ceremony, and even Sheriff Morrison showed up, standing in the back with his hat in his hands and a rare smile on his weathered face. Amelia wore a dress she had made herself from cream-colored silk, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She had never felt more beautiful than when she saw Isaac standing at the altar, his expression full of such love and awe that it took her breath away. Isaac wore his best clothes, the dark suit he had brought with him from Colorado and rarely had occasion to wear. But even in fine clothing, he looked every inch the cowboy, all broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin and barely tamed dark hair. To Amelia, he was the most handsome man she had ever seen. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through all the days of their lives. When the minister finally pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed his bride with such tenderness that several women in the congregation reached for their handkerchiefs. Sam Morgan had given them a wedding gift beyond price, a small piece of land on the edge of his property and materials to build a cabin. Over the next months, Isaac worked on constructing their home whenever he was not working the cattle. Other ranch hands helped, and even some of the townspeople who had once shunned Amelia came out to lend a hand, shamefaced but eager to make amends. The cabin was modest but sturdy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a small extra room that Amelia immediately claimed as her sewing workshop. Isaac built her a large table where she could cut fabric and a shelf to hold her supplies. He even installed extra windows to give her good light for her detailed work. Amelia's business grew steadily. The commission from Sam Morgan led to others, and soon she had more work than she could handle. She hired 2 other young women from town to help her, providing them with fair wages and training. Within a year, her little sewing enterprise had become one of the most successful businesses in Dalhart. But more important than the business success was the life she and Isaac built together. Their cabin became a true home, filled with laughter and love, and the comfortable rhythm of two people who were perfectly suited to each other. Isaac would come home from long days on the range to find Amelia at her sewing table, and he would kiss the top of her head before washing up for dinner. They would eat together, talking about their days, sharing their dreams and plans. At night, they would lie in bed wrapped in each other's arms, marveling at how lucky they were to have found each other. Isaac would trace patterns on Amelia's skin and tell her she was beautiful. Amelia would run her fingers through Isaac's hair and tell him he was her hero, her home, her everything. Their first child, a son, was born in the spring of 1886, on a morning when the wildflowers were blooming across the Texas prairie. They named him James, after Isaac's father. The boy had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and from the moment he was born, he had both his parents wrapped around his tiny finger. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, gentle and patient with his son even after long days of hard work. Amelia would often find them together in the evenings, Isaac holding the baby against his shoulder and singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice while James dozed contentedly. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, and they named her Rose. She had Amelia's blonde hair and Isaac's striking gray-blue eyes, and a personality that was equal parts stubborn and sweet. With 2 children, the cabin felt almost too small, so Isaac began planning an addition. Sam Morgan, who had grown quite fond of Isaac and Amelia, had gradually been giving Isaac more and more responsibility at the ranch. By 1888, he had promoted Isaac to ranch foreman, a position that came with significantly better pay and even a small share in the ranch's profits. Morgan had no children of his own, and he increasingly spoke of Isaac as the son he had never had. The Thorntons, meanwhile, had become considerably less prominent in Dalhart society. Mr. Thornton's bank had faced financial difficulties after several bad investments, and he had been forced to sell his interest to a consortium from Dallas. Mrs. Thornton's drinking problem had become impossible to hide, and she had become something of a recluse, rarely leaving her house. The couple eventually moved away to live with relatives in Houston, and Dalhart was generally relieved to see them go. As for Ellen, the maid who had helped reveal the truth about the necklace, Amelia made sure she was taken care of. When Mrs. Thornton dismissed her, Amelia immediately hired Ellen to work in her sewing business. Ellen proved to have a real talent for embroidery, and she became one of Amelia's most valued employees and a good friend. The years passed in a pattern of work and love, challenge and joy. Isaac and Amelia's family grew to include 2 more children, another son they named Samuel after Sam Morgan, and then finally another daughter, Lily. Their cabin had been expanded twice to accommodate everyone, and the land around it was well tended and productive. Sam Morgan passed away in the winter of 1895, and to everyone's surprise but not Isaac's, he left the ranch to Isaac in his will. The old rancher had never married after his wife's death, and Isaac had become the closest thing to family he had. It was a tremendous responsibility, but also a tremendous gift, and Isaac was determined to honor Sam's memory by running the ranch well. With the ranch now theirs, Isaac and Amelia built a proper ranch house, large enough for their growing family and comfortable enough to reflect their success. But they never forgot where they had started, never took for granted the blessings they had been given. Amelia's sewing business continued to thrive, and she had become known throughout the region for the quality of her work. She employed a dozen women now, providing them with fair wages and safe working conditions, remembering all too well what it was like to be vulnerable and alone. She was particularly known for giving opportunities to women who had been cast aside by society, women who reminded her of herself all those years ago when Mrs. Thornton had tried to destroy her. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1904, Isaac and Amelia sat together on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the Texas prairie. Their children were grown, or nearly so. James was already working the ranch alongside his father, and Rose had just married a young man from a neighboring ranch. Samuel and Lily were still at home, but they too would soon be making their own ways in the world. You ever think about that day? Amelia asked, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. The day you gave me your boots. Isaac smiled, his arm tightening around her. I think about it all the time. It was the best decision I ever made, stopping to help you. I was so scared that day, Amelia admitted. So hurt and humiliated and convinced my life was over. And then you appeared like something out of a storybook and everything changed. You changed my life too, Isaac said seriously. Before you, I was just drifting, never really connected to anything or anyone. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build instead of just wandering. You gave me a home, Amelia. You gave me everything. She turned to look up at him, her eyes still as green and clear as they had been 2 decades ago, though now framed by laugh lines and the occasional strand of silver in her hair. We gave each other everything, she corrected. That is what love does. It multiplies what we have, makes us more than we could ever be alone. Isaac kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of the kind of love that only deepens with time. I would do it all again, he murmured against her lips. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you always. And I would choose you, Amelia replied. Always and forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, they sat together in comfortable silence, hand in hand, 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. What had started with a simple act of kindness on a dusty Texas street had grown into a love story that would be told and retold in Dalhart for generations to come. Their grandchildren would later sit at their feet and beg for the story of how Grandma and Grandpa met, and Isaac and Amelia would exchange knowing glances before Isaac would begin, his voice rich with memory and affection. Well now, he would say, it all started on a hot summer day in 1884 when your grandmother was forced to walk barefoot through town, and I happened to be in the right place at the right time to give her my boots and carry her home. But the real story, the important story, is what came after that. The real story is about how we fell in love and built a life together, about how one moment of kindness can change everything, about how the best things in life are worth fighting for. And Amelia would add, her eyes twinkling, and about how sometimes the person you least expect turns out to be exactly the person you need. Their youngest grandchild, a girl named Emma, once asked if it was really love at first sight. Amelia had laughed and shaken her head. No, sweetheart. It was not love at first sight, but it was recognition at first sight. I recognized in your grandfather a good man, a kind heart, someone who would stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. And that recognition grew into love day by day, moment by moment, until I could not imagine my life without him. Isaac had squeezed her hand and added, and I recognized in your grandmother a fighter, someone who refused to be beaten down by life's hardships. I recognized strength and grace and dignity, and I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life making sure she never had to face hardship alone again. In the spring of 1910, Isaac and Amelia celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary by taking a trip to Colorado, to the place where Isaac had grown up. He wanted to show Amelia where he came from, to introduce her to the mountains that had shaped his childhood. They stood together at his parents' graves, and Isaac told them about his life, about the incredible woman he had married and the family they had built together. "I think they would have loved you," he told Amelia as they walked back toward town. "My mother especially. She always wanted me to find someone who would challenge me and support me in equal measure. That is exactly what you do." Amelia smiled up at him. "I wish I could have met them. I wish our children could have known all their grandparents." "They know them through the stories we tell," Isaac said. "Through the values we pass on. My father's work ethic, my mother's kindness, your parents' love of learning and community. All of that lives on in James and Rose and Samuel and Lily." It was true. Their children had grown into remarkable adults, each one carrying forward the best parts of both their parents. James ran the ranch with the same integrity and fairness his father had shown. Rose had opened a school in Dalhart, providing education to children who might otherwise have gone without. Samuel had become a veterinarian, caring for the animals that were so important to ranch life. And Lily, their youngest, had followed in her mother's footsteps and was learning the sewing business, already showing signs of the same entrepreneurial spirit that had made Amelia so successful. As Isaac and Amelia grew older, they became pillars of the Dalhart community. Isaac served on the town council and helped establish better infrastructure and services. Amelia was involved in numerous charitable organizations, always with a special focus on helping vulnerable women and children. Together, they donated money to build a new church and a library, wanting to give back to the town that had ultimately embraced them. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1924, the entire town threw them a celebration. The party was held at the town hall, which was packed with friends, family, employees, and community members. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, as person after person stood up to talk about how Isaac and Amelia had touched their lives. Ellen, now a successful businesswoman in her own right, spoke about how Amelia had given her a chance when no one else would. The children of families who had received Isaac and Amelia's charitable help spoke about opportunities they would never have had otherwise. Ranch hands talked about Isaac's fairness and generosity as an employer. Customers praised the quality of Amelia's work and her commitment to her craft. But perhaps the most touching moment came when their own children stood together to speak. James, now a man in his late 30s with children of his own, talked about growing up watching his parents' love story unfold. "They taught us what real love looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not the flashy, dramatic kind you read about in books, but the everyday kind. The kind that shows up in 1,000 small gestures. The way Dad always made sure Mom's favorite flowers were on the table. The way Mom always had Dad's coffee ready before dawn. The way they talked through problems instead of fighting. The way they supported each other's dreams. The way they never stopped holding hands, even after 40 years. Rose added, "They taught us that love is a choice you make every day, that it is about respect and partnership and choosing to see the best in each other, even when times are hard. They showed us that a truly good marriage makes both people better, stronger, more capable of facing whatever life throws at them." When it was time for Isaac and Amelia to speak, they stood together at the front of the hall, hands clasped, looking out at the sea of faces. Isaac cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "When I rode into Dalhart in the summer of 1884, he said, "I was just another drifting cowboy, looking for work and not expecting to stay long. I had no idea that in this dusty little town, I would find the woman who would become my whole world. I had no idea that one afternoon, One moment of seeing someone in trouble and deciding to help would change the entire course of my life. Amelia continued, and I was a young woman alone in the world, working hard and dreaming of something better but not really believing it would happen. I certainly never imagined that my worst day would turn into the first day of my best life. But that is what happened when Isaac gave me his boots and carried me home. He did not just save me from physical pain that day. He saved me from the belief that I had to face everything alone. Isaac took over again. What we want to say tonight to all of you is thank you. Thank you for witnessing our love, for supporting us through the years, for being part of our story. And to our children and grandchildren especially, we want to say this. Love is the greatest adventure you will ever have. It will challenge you and change you and sometimes scare you. But if you find the right person, if you find someone who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway, if you find someone who makes you want to be better, kinder, braver, then hold on to them with everything you have. Amelia finished, because at the end of the day, at the end of a life, all that really matters is the love you gave and received. All that matters are the lives you touched and the people who touched yours. We have been blessed beyond measure, and we are grateful for every single day. The room erupted in applause, and if there was not a dry eye in the house, well, that was only fitting for a love story as beautiful as theirs. Isaac and Amelia lived to see their golden wedding anniversary in 1934, a remarkable achievement for a time when life expectancy was much shorter than it would later become. They were now in their 70s, slowed by age but still sharp of mind and devoted to each other. Their family had expanded to include numerous grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, and their ranch and business continued to prosper under the management of their children. On the morning of their 50th anniversary, Isaac woke before dawn as he always had, decades of ranch work having ingrained the habit too deep to break. He looked over at Amelia, still sleeping peacefully beside him, her hair now completely silver but her face still beautiful to him, still the same face he had fallen in love with half a century ago. Carefully, so as not to wake her, he got out of bed and went to the kitchen. He made coffee the way she liked it and picked a handful of wildflowers from the garden she had cultivated over the years. When he returned to the bedroom, she was just beginning to stir. "Good morning, Mrs. Vaughn," he said softly, setting the coffee and flowers on her nightstand. Amelia opened her eyes and smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart so long ago. "Good morning, Mr. Vaughn. Have you been awake long? Just a little while. I wanted to bring you something to start our special day." He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. His hands were gnarled now with age and arthritis, but they were still strong, still capable, still the hands that had protected and provided for her all these years. 50 years, Amelia marveled, running her thumb across his knuckles. "Can you believe it has been 50 years since we stood in that little church and promised to love each other forever?" "Best decision I ever made," Isaac said, exactly as he had said countless times before. "And I would make it again in a heartbeat." They spent the day surrounded by family, celebrating in the ranch house that had become the center of their family's life. There was food and laughter, music and dancing, stories told and memories shared. At one point, their great-grandson, a boy of about 6 named after Isaac, climbed onto his lap and asked, "Great-grandpa, what is the secret to staying married for 50 years?" Isaac looked across the room to where Amelia was holding a baby, cooing and smiling, still so full of love and life despite her years. He thought about everything they had been through together, all the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. "The secret," he said finally, is to marry someone who makes you laugh, who challenges you to be better, who stands by you when things get hard, and who loves you not despite your flaws but including them. The secret is to choose love every single day, even when it is not easy, especially when it is not easy. The secret is to never take each other for granted, to say thank you and I love you often, and to remember that you are on the same team, facing life together. He paused, then added with a twinkle in his eye, and it does not hurt to marry someone who is beautiful and smart and the best thing that ever happened to you. Young Isaac giggled. Great-grandma is all those things. Yes, Isaac agreed, his voice full of warmth and affection. Yes, she certainly is. As the sun set on their 50th anniversary, Isaac and Amelia found themselves alone again on the porch, just as they had been so many times over the years. The house behind them was full of family, but they had snuck away for a few moments of quiet together. "Do you remember," Amelia said softly, "when you told me that I was where you wanted to plant roots and build a life?" "I remember," Isaac confirmed. "And I meant every word." "Look what we built," Amelia said, gesturing to encompass not just the house but everything it represented. The family, the business, the life they had created together from nothing more than hope and hard work and love. "Look at what grew from those roots you planted." Isaac pulled her close, and despite their age, despite the aches and pains that came with 70-plus years of living, they fit together as perfectly as they always had. "It is more than I ever dreamed possible," he admitted. "When I gave you my boots that day, I never imagined it would lead to all this. I just wanted to help someone who needed help. And in helping me, you helped yourself," Amelia said. "You gave yourself the home you had been looking for. You gave yourself a reason to stay." "You were always the reason," Isaac corrected gently. "From that very first day, you were the reason for everything." They stood there as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, holding each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given, grateful for the love that had sustained them through 50 years, and would sustain them through whatever time they had left. Isaac Vaughn passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1938, just shy of his 80th birthday. He died as he had lived his adult life, with Amelia by his side, holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you," whispered to the woman who had been his partner, his love, his home for 54 years. Amelia grieved deeply, as one does when losing a spouse of more than half a century. But she was sustained by her family, by her memories, and by the absolute certainty that she and Isaac had lived their love fully, had built something beautiful together, had left the world better than they found it. She lived for 3 more years, staying active in her business and her community, delighting in her ever-growing family. She often spoke of Isaac, keeping his memory alive through stories, making sure the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had not known him well understood what an exceptional man he had been. On a spring morning in 1941, Amelia Bradford Vaughn died surrounded by her children, her last words an echo of Isaac's. "I love you all." She was 81 years old, and she had lived a life full of purpose, passion, and profound love. They buried her next to Isaac in the cemetery on the edge of Dalhart, under a spreading oak tree they had planted together decades earlier. The headstone was simple but perfect. Isaac Vaughn, 1859–1938, Amelia Bradford Vaughn, 1860–1941. Together forever their story became legend in Dalhart, passed down through generations. It was told to children as an example of true love, told to young couples as inspiration, told to anyone who needed to believe that kindness matters, that love conquers, that one person can make a difference in another's life. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of their descendants, and Amelia's sewing business evolved into a successful clothing manufacturing company. But more important than the material legacy was the spiritual one. A family that valued kindness, integrity, hard work, and above all, love. And on quiet summer evenings when the wind blows across the Texas prairie, some say you can still see them. Two figures on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset together, choosing each other again and again for all eternity, just as they had in life. It is a fitting image for a love story that began with bare feet and borrowed boots and grew into something eternal, something that transcended time and circumstance, and even death itself. Because some loves are just too powerful to be contained by a single lifetime. Some loves echo forward through generations, inspiring and encouraging and reminding everyone who hears the story that real love, true love, the kind of love that changes lives and builds legacies, is always worth fighting for, always worth choosing, always worth celebrating. Isaac gave Amelia his boots and carried her home one hot summer day in 1884, but what he really gave her was his heart, his loyalty, his unwavering devotion. And she gave him the same in return, creating together a love story for the ages, a reminder that even in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Old West, gentleness and kindness and love could not only survive but thrive, creating beauty and meaning and family that would endure long after they were gone. Their great-great-grandchildren still live on the ranch today, still tell the story, still hold up Isaac and Amelia as the gold standard of what marriage should be. And in a world that often seems to have forgotten the value of lasting commitment, of choosing love daily, of building something together that is greater than what either person could build alone, the story of the cowboy who gave her his boots and carried her home remains a beacon of hope, a testament to the transforming power of love, and a reminder that sometimes the best things in life begin in the most unexpected ways.